Hey guys, John here. So the biggest question I always get when I do these courses is where can I get access to the source code? So I obviously can't upload that here on YouTube, so I've made that available for you over on BitTorrent. And along with the source code, you'll also be able to actually download the videos to your computer so you can have them forever. So if for some reason something crazy happened and I decided to delete them, or YouTube kicked me off of their site or whatever, it wouldn't really matter for you, because you would have all the source code, you'd have all the videos, everything essentially that I've created for the course you would have on your own computer. So I've created a link in the description where you can find that stuff over on BitTorrent. Please consider going over there, supporting me that way. I'd appreciate that. Also, please consider making a donation here on YouTube using the fan funding. This is how, or one of the ways that I'm able to keep all of the videos that I'm doing and releasing here on YouTube for free, by those who are able to pitching in and allowing me to do that. So please consider that. And if you need access to any of the resources that I use through everything that I do online, coding, releasing videos, etc., you can head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/resources, and I have a whole slew of all sorts of different resources, from hosting to different tutorials and just everything over there that I use. So again, johnmorrisonline.com/resources. All right, on to the lesson. Hey there, John Morris here. I'm the lead instructor for the Wishlist Member Certified Developers Program and the CEO here at johnmorrisonline.com. And in this video, I'm going to do our first practical exercise, which is how to build a fluid grid website, or a website using the fluid grid approach. This is pretty much the main way that I'm going to encourage you to build the majority of your websites, unless you're building some sort of application type website where what your website is more of an application than an actual website, and you're designing it to be an application for, say, example, a iPhone app or an Android app or whatever. Then in that case, you'd maybe look at the combo approach. But the majority of cases, if you're building just kind of a regular website, this is the approach you're going to want to take. Now, my goal here with this video is to show you what is probably a new way of designing your websites, or a new approach to designing your websites that makes it a lot easier and a lot quicker for you to build websites, and be able to rely on kind of whether it's your own quote-unquote framework or you're using another framework, to be able to construct your CSS in a way where you can do all of the modifying that you need to do to your layout using HTML, and you can rely on your framework to do the majority of the responsive stuff that you need to do. And so what I'm getting at is, a lot of times when I see people do responsive web design, or even when I first started doing responsive web design, they get really hyper focused on, for example, let's say this container here. Okay, so if we just look at this element, and we'll go ahead and just hide all this. All right, so we have this section, and it's just, that's this container that we have right up here. So what a lot of times that I will see people do, or I used to do, is we would create all of our styling for this particular section, and then we would go down to the responsive area, to our media queries, and we would target this section specifically and make it responsive. Okay, and that works. The problem with that is that now you have to come down, and when you create a new section here, you have to make it responsive as well. You come down here and you have a little bit different setup. You have to make it responsive as well. What you end up with is a lot of code in your media queries because you're targeting one element at a time. And so the approach that, the different approach I'm going to show you is how to construct your design in such a way where you don't have to do that, where you are basically using your grid to target all of your elements and make them responsive, and then you just build your HTML in a way where that basically gets all handled for you, and there may be a few things that you have to do at the end, but very little. You'll notice with this design that in the media queries, and obviously we're going to go through all that, but in the media queries, the only thing that's really being done in the media queries is our overall grid structure, which we've already covered in the fluid grid thing, but we'll cover again here, of course, and our typography, which we covered in the responsive typesetting lesson. So those are the only things that are going on in our media queries. We're not actually targeting individual elements in our media queries because we're building our HTML in such a way and we're using our grid and so forth that we don't need to. All right, and just to show you, I'll go ahead and resize this, and you'll see that as we resize, the things change. You can see the things changing as we resize this. So we get a little bit more, getting a little bit more change here, and then as we get kind of down to our final one, we get our top to bottom view, and you can see this is all kind of changed. Okay. So one thing I don't want you to do as you go through this video is I don't want you to get too hyper focused on the design. I just kind of jokingly throughout this made this thing all about flat design in terms of the content. That's just to give me something to put somewhat real content in there as opposed to a bunch of dummy content. I do like flat design, but that I don't want you to get too hyper focused on the design in the sense that you may look at this and go, well, I don't really like this design. I understand that. I mean, this isn't necessarily 100% something that I'm in love with either, but what I want you to focus on is and obviously what this course is about is the responsive part of it. And to show you, I basically just created a few different things, common things that you might see, to show you how you can rely on your grid and how you can use your HTML structure to make your site responsive without a ton of work. Okay, this is also a really good lead-in to working with frameworks, because I essentially created a really basic framework from scratch for this, and we'll walk through that, and that'll help you to understand hopefully how that gets put together, and then from there how you actually use it when you're building your website. And then you can go out and you can look at obviously a more robust framework like Bootstrap or Foundation or Skeleton or whatever, and you'll have a better understanding of how to actually use those frameworks to build your website. And ultimately that's what I recommend. You could create your own from scratch, and again, that's a big thing with developers, is a lot of times you're like, well, I want to build it all from scratch. It's sometimes almost an ego thing, where it's, well, I want to prove that I can do this or that, and that's fine if you want to do that once. But as you get into actually building websites on a regular basis, I highly recommend that you do use some sort of framework. Reason being is those frameworks are used by a lot of other people. So there's a lot of people that are helping to develop that framework and keep it moving forward and testing it. And those frameworks are also used across a lot of different websites. So bugs and things like that are going to be found a lot easier. They're going to be solved a lot better. And ultimately, that framework, because it's community developed, because it's used across a number of different sites in a lot of different ways, it's ultimately always going to be better than anything that you could ever build on your own, because you're just not going to have as many people using it, and it not being used on as many sites as something like Bootstrap or Foundation or so forth. Okay, so and also to add to that, you can edit or you can change those frameworks in just about any way you want. So there's really no reason not to use them. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and just dive into this, okay? So first, I'm going to run through the CSS and kind of the framework part, and then kind of try to give you an overview of what's going on in CSS, then kind of dive into some individual things that I think are important, and then show you how that translates into you writing your HTML. All right, so first off, we have just our HTML5 reset. You're probably familiar with this. This is basically just kind of a reset for older browsers to try and bringing them up to speed as much with what's going on in HTML5 as possible. Right, so you have things like some of these newer tags setting the display block so they display correctly and so forth. The box sizing for certain things, some of the float clearing and stuff like that. I'm not going to dive into this too much because you can literally you just Google HTML5 reset and copy this, and there's really not a ton to look at in terms of customizing this. This pretty much does what you need to do in terms of the reset. If you want to get into writing your own resets and so forth, that's fine. That's not really what this course is about, and I'll kind of let you figure that out on your own. But that's essentially what this first part here is just resetting everything to if someone's on an older browser that's not very HTML5 friendly, this will help to ease some of that pain. Okay. All right, next we're going to look at the structure section. So the structure section is basically our fluid grid. So from our fluid grid video, the styling, this is pretty much pretty much line for line, exactly what we did in our fluid grid video. The only real difference here is I removed the there was a styling for the row. There was a custom row class like this, and there was had a margin bottom of 35 pixels. I removed that because that was more for showing the grid on that demo than it was actually how you want to build it. Okay, so that margin bottom for the row of 35 pixels, you don't necessarily need. Now again, you may look at your designs and you may want to customize how your row class is displayed, but for this particular setup, and I'm pretty sure things like Bootstrap and so forth, they don't do a ton with that row element in terms of styling, and it's kind of just a container that helps with organization and some of the display a little bit. All right, so this is all of the fluid grid. We've really gone through this all pretty heavily, so I'm not going to go back through this. There's really very little that's changed. The only thing that I added in was this image tag down here, set to max width of 100%, which is another way that you can deal with dynamic images, is set the max width to 100%. And that basically will make any large image that's larger than its container, it'll only let it be 100% of its container. So it'll size it down so that's 100% of its container. The advantage of this is that it also, when you're talking about small images, it's not actually going to resize the image. If it's less than 100% of its container, it's going to leave the image alone. So it actually kind of does both of those things in one. You'll notice that down here, all the way down here, we're not doing anything with the image tag in our responsive setup because this max width pretty well takes care of that for us. There may be some small things that you need to look at depending on your design, but that pretty well takes care of our resizing for our dynamic images. All right, next we have our typography. Again, this is based on what we talked about in the responsive typesetting video. Again, this is why I structured the course this way, so that when we get to these practical examples, you've been through the approaches, you've been through the individual skills, and we don't really have to get too bogged down in talking about all of this stuff again. We can kind of focus on what's key to these practical exercises. So again, this typography section here is pretty much identical to what we talked about in the responsive typesetting video. The only real difference is the font. You know, I used two different fonts, for one for the paragraph and kind of general text, and then one for the titles. So I used two different fonts. So it's really, the fonts are different. The actual numbers that I've put here for the font size and the line height may be different. But again, it's just based off of the exact same calculations that we did in the responsive typesetting video. Okay, so there's nothing in terms of how those sizes were determined that's any different than what we've already talked about. Here's all our headings again, same as what we talked about in the responsive typesetting. And then probably the one thing that I added is I just changed the link color to kind of a yellow color for the site. Again, this could be whatever you want for your site. All right, so that is kind of, in a nutshell, this up here would be considered kind of the framework, okay? Everything to this point, and maybe I'll just go ahead and put in this end framework right here. Okay, that's kind of the framework. That's that and the responsive piece down below here, which again is everything that exactly that we talked about inside of inside of our fluid grid video. That's exactly the same, and also I guess the responsive typesetting, because we're changing the font sizes. But again, all stuff that we've already covered in the individual skill videos. Okay, so again, that's kind of the framework. Everything below here is kind of our individual overrides that we're doing for certain things. Okay, so this is more specific customization. You can see that it's talking about icons, it's talking about, you know, a line left, line right, so forth, background colors, you know, these hero units, which are different kinds of containers, certain typography elements that we're using. Now, I think it'll be good to go and look at the HTML at this point, but what I want to say about this is what we're doing here is we're not targeting very specific elements. We're creating general classes and actually using classes in the way that they're supposed to be used. And the way I want you to think about it is when you write your HTML, you're going to write your HTML with your main structural elements based off of your fluid grid so that it has the responsiveness built into it. And then when you want to modify something, so for example, if you want to modify a heading in a particular section, instead of targeting that specifically, unless the style that you're going to add to that is specific purely to that one element, instead of targeting it specifically and then repeating styles, so targeting another element specifically and giving it a very similar style, instead of doing that, you want to create what I refer to as modifier classes. So classes that you can add to your HTML tags that will modify it in a certain way. So for example, you see this uppercase, right? This is a text transform uppercase. So this is any element this is added to, it's going to take the text inside of that element and it's going to transform it into uppercase. Okay, so that's a modifier. Now there may be several different places where we want our text to be uppercase. Well, we can use this class throughout to make it uppercase. You can also see the background colors here. Again, instead of targeting a specific element and making it uppercase, or making it the background blue, we can create a generic class of background blue and add that modifier class to an element to make its background blue or dark gray. If we want to align something center, instead of targeting that element specifically, we can just add this align center class. So what you end up with is you end up with certain elements that may have 3 or 4 of these modifier classes to them, because maybe you want to align center background blue and you want to transform the text to uppercase. So it would have uppercase, background blue, and align center all added as one of its classes. The advantage of that is that you don't have to constantly rewrite this code for every element that you want to align center. You can just add that tag. So what happens is once you build your CSS, you can come into your HTML and you have the tools available now when you're writing your HTML, the CSS tools, to be able to just add different modifiers to different tags and get the desired effect that you're after. And then, of course, obviously, as you're building it, if you find that, well, hey, it would be nice to have this modifier, I want to have this specific design, you can create a new modifier in order to add that to that element, as opposed to targeting things specifically. Now, there are still cases where you're going to target things specifically. So for example, a good example one would be this footer P. We're targeting the footer tag, and we're targeting the paragraph text in it. That's fairly specific. Here, we're targeting the hero unit, H1, and P.lead. That's fairly specific, although these hero units can be used over and over again. You'll use them usually in multiple times, so it's still fairly general, but there is some specificity to it. It's not quite the same as like this background blue and this align center. You can see with our icons here, this again is somewhat specific to a certain type of icon, but we're doing it in a way where this can be reused, and you can display icons in multiple places throughout your site and still get the same design. Here in this content section is where we're getting fairly specific, targeting the content div, or the div with the ID of content, targeting our post, a div with a class of post, read more link. Here we're very specific. This is a features list thing that is, again, it could be reused, but it's pretty specific in terms of what we're targeting here. All right, so again, you create CSS tools though that give you what you need in order when you're building your HTML to display the site in the way you want. All right, so let's go ahead and go through that. All this up here is our head tag. This is pretty common stuff that you're probably used to. Our doc type, our language, our character set. Here's our title. Here's all our meta stuff. Basically, you have your viewport, which you pretty much almost always want to do this way. The device width, initial scale 1.0. That just makes sure that the pixels and so forth match up correctly. The description, the author. Here's our OG for our OG or our open graph meta properties for Facebook, and then down here we're getting into we're adding a custom font. So I added one called Roboto, one called Montserrat, Oxygen, and Yellowtail. Actually, you could probably get rid of this Montserrat and this Yellowtail because they're not used in this design, although you may want them. I was thinking I might use them, but ended up not. Here for icon fonts, we're adding Font Awesome. So the icons that you see on this design are from Font Awesome, and we'll go through that, how those are used. So again, this is a CDN, so all you have to do to get those fonts available is add this link here. Here's our style sheet that we added, pretty standard, and here's jQuery being added. I don't use jQuery on this design. I just included in here to give you an example of how you might include your scripts and kind of keep your head tag organized. Okay. All right, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. All right, so we're in our body tag, and the first thing we have is we have a section, class is background blue, and an ID of headline. All right, so just like I talked about, we can add a modifier to an element to give it a certain design. So we give this a background of blue. So if you look up here, that's what creates this blue background here. Now, I want you to just pay close attention to how this is structured. First, we have our section tag, and we give it a background of blue. And then inside of that, we have our container. Now, you remember from the fluid grid, our container is what actually changes in size. If we come back up to our CSS, we have our container right here, and this is just setting the margin to basically centering it. But if we come down to our responsive area, remember it's our container that we're actually changing the size of. Okay, so the reason this is important is because you may be in a situation where you want a full width blue like this, but then you want your text inside of here to be in a fixed. We want it inside of our grid. Well, building our HTML in this way, using sections and then having our container where it's what changes, allows us to do that. So if we want the full section and we want the full width blue from edge to edge like this, we can add that modifier of background blue to the section because it's outside of the container div, so that it's going to stretch the full width of the screen. However, if we want some sort of container inside of that fixed width to be a certain color, so we don't want this to stretch from window to window, then we can change where we add this modifier div. So let's just go ahead and, for demo's sake, we'll go ahead and add it to the row tag. This isn't going to look very good, but it'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Now you'll see it's just this section that's blue. It's not stretching from side to side because this is inside that container div. Okay, that's again, I don't know, I don't know how much web design you have or haven't done, but that in and of itself was always a big problem or a big headache inside of web design. Is certain parts of your design you might want to have the background where it's a certain color and it stretches the full width of the screen that's viewing it, and in certain areas you may want to have something where the background is it doesn't stretch the full width. A lot of times what designers would do when they built a design is they would create something like this. It would be div ID equals wrapper. And they would have this wrap all of their content inside of their body tag. And then they would make this wrapper a certain fixed size, or they'd make this the responsive part of it. The problem with doing that is that now if I want to have a certain part where I have a background color that stretches the full width of the screen, I have to break out of this wrapper. So I have to close this wrapper and then do what I want to do and then get back into it in order to have it so it will structure the rest of the site. So that's the advantage of using a class for container and having it control all your sizing, because you can put elements inside and outside of this container div, and that will determine whether or not they stretch the full width of the screen or they don't. And so you'll notice that here we break everything up into sections like this, and those are outside of our container div, and even our footer here. And then that gives us the flexibility for this section if we want to give it a background color and we want to have it stretch the full width or not. Okay, and you'll see that up here we're having it stretch the full width. Down here we're not putting a background color, and it looks like more of a fixed width design here. Okay, so that's one of the first big things. And again, you'll notice we're using a modifier, so it's easy to change the color. Here we have background of blue. Here we have a background of dark gray. Okay, so I can make any element blue or dark gray just by adding that modifier to it. All right, so then inside of our section tag, again, we talked a lot about the container div. This is what provides our structure. We have our row, and then inside there we have our span 12, and basically the container, the row, and the span 12, doing it like that is what makes this responsive. It's what's going to make it so we don't have to do anything else to make it responsive. We're putting it inside of our grid, and even though we're having it stretch the full width of what our grid is, this is what's going to make it so it's responsive and we don't have to do anything to it. So now we can dive in and we can do a class. You'll notice we have class hero unit, and we have align center. Now this hero unit is basically just it's something basically that I saw inside of Bootstrap, and what a hero unit is it's a different type of div. So we're saying that this is a div that we're going to style the text and so forth a little bit differently, and it's designed to maybe stand out a little bit more. Okay, so you can see that this here is kind of meant to stand out and pop out. Same with this is actually a hero unit as well, as opposed to maybe something like this where it's more of just your standard post, you're going to view this content type thing. Right, so you can name it whatever. I used hero unit because it's what Bootstrap uses, and I design most of my stuff with Bootstrap, so it's just familiar to me. You notice that we also have this modifier of align center. If I get rid of that, then this won't be aligned center. It's going to be aligned to the left. Okay, and maybe that's what you want. So if that's what you want for a particular area, you just don't add that modifier. That's, again, the power of creating your CSS as kind of a set of different tools that you can then modify different elements in order to give them a certain style. So I want all this aligned center, so that's what I'm doing here. Regular standard H1 tag, we do edit it based off of the hero unit. So if we come over, go up here, so our hero unit H1, you can see inside the hero unit we just change this a little bit, make sure the font weight is normal, no margin on it, and we squeeze the letter spacing. Okay, so it's a small tweak to the H1 tag if we're inside of a hero unit. Otherwise, all the other H1 tags outside of any hero unit are gonna just display as normal. Okay, P class equals lead. So this is a special type of paragraph text that we want that we usually use inside of our hero unit, but you don't have to use. You don't have to only use it there, and also it's not that's not the only kind of text that we put inside of the hero unit. So if we look at what we're doing here, it's really just a simple modification. We're making the margin top 0. Basically the reason we're doing that is because we want this text, we want this nice big headline, and then we want this text as almost kind of a subtitle, so we want it closer to those two elements, close to one each other. So you notice I'm getting rid of all of the margin on the H1, and I'm getting rid of the margin on the top on the paragraph tag, so it's closer to the headline here, so it looks almost kind of like a subtitle. All right. Okay, so that's kind of what we're doing with those different elements. All right, then as we move to our next one, this is kind of where we're going to kind of start to see a little bit more of using the modifiers. Okay, so here we're making this dark gray. So all I have to do is add a class of background dark gray to the section, and I get that. Again, container, row, span. That's essentially what makes this responsive. So I don't have to target this element specifically to make it responsive. If I put it inside of the elements I've created for my grid, it's going to be naturally responsive. That's something I really want to drive home, is that once you set up this fluid grid setup that we created here, you just always structure HTML in this way: container, row, span, and then these spans can be whatever you want them to be. Again, as we talked about in the fluid grid video, always adding up to 12. So you'll notice here we have span 12, so that equals 12. Here inside of our row we have span 4, span 3, so 4 times 3 is 12. Here we have span 8 and span 4, so 8 plus 4 is 12. 12 is your full width. You always add up your the elements that you're basically dividing into columns so that they add up to 12, a total of 12 inside of a row. All right, that's again what makes this naturally responsive. All right, so again we have an H1 tag inside of a here unit align center, just like we did up top here. So we've kind of already covered that. And then here we have another row, a features list because class, because we're targeting some things specifically in here. This is a certain type of list that we're after, but we still have some really general things going on in here. So for our icon, and just to take a look at what we're talking about this right here, okay? So we're using modifiers to create that in a certain way. So we have an icons modifier. So if we're working with icons, then we're going to work with it in a certain way. So you can see that for the icons, we're doing a margin bottom of 20 pixels, 100 by 100, and we're centering. Okay, so that's because we know that we want a very specific look for this. We're doing icons colored. So if you look at the icons colored, we're basically using as kind of a modifier so that we can add yellow, blue, green, so forth. Also, that helps us target with this so that we can add the font awesome family, the font weight, and the font style, and so forth. Okay, and then you'll notice that we do round, and then we do yellow, green, blue, red. Okay, so the round, if we look over here, is just a border radius of 100 pixels, and then the colors, the background color, yellow, blue, green, red. Okay, and then our icon's I is the actual element that holds the icon, and we're display block, font size, line height, color, text align. This is what actually styles the look of the icon itself. Okay, so what the advantage of this is, let's say I don't want this to be round. Okay, so for our yellow icon, I don't want it to be round. Now normally I'd have to go in and target this this one element very specifically and make it not round, and there would be a bunch of targeting and CSS involved with doing that. Here all I have to do in my HTML is remove that round modifier and it's gone. Okay, maybe I don't want this yellow, maybe I want to change the color to green. Again, normally I'd have to go in and target this element really specifically and override CSS and so forth. Here, all I have to do is change the modifier, and now I have it green. Okay, so that's the advantage of these modifiers, is that you can use them in certain combinations to create certain effects within your design. So now, all I have to do is, I've done all everything in terms of my container, my row, my span for responsiveness. Now I have a div where I add some modifiers to it, and then I put in my icon. This part right here really comes from Font Awesome. Okay, so this is how you use their icons. So the only thing I'm doing really to make this icon look the way it looks is adding these modifiers right here. Now that is, once that CSS is written, working with this becomes really, really easy. I don't have to sit here and target and rework a bunch of code. I could just add these modifiers and create the look that I'm after, and I can change that look and for different pieces and so forth very easily by adding or removing different modifiers. Okay, so again, very powerful because I can do it all right here in HTML. I don't have to add a bunch of styles to my style sheet to do it. You'll see down here for H3 tag, very similar. We have an H3 tag, but we're modifying with uppercase and align center. Okay, so that's what makes this uppercase and aligned center. So again, it makes it real easy to make these elements right here uppercase and align center without having to go in and target them specifically. I can just add this modifier class to them and I get the effect that I'm after. All right, and so it's the same story all the way down through here for our icons, for our uppercase, align center, and so forth through that whole section. Down here again, we have our section, idea content, container, row, span 8. I wrap this in a post div because I want to, these individual items, I want to be able to style them in a specific way if I need to. That's maybe a little bit different. So again, I'm using a post class so that all of them will get that same design. And then this is actually just really standard text here, an H3 tag, image link, standard paragraph tag. The only one that's really different here is this read more tag, and that is just some specific styling I added for the read more. So if we come here, the read more link, gave it a blue background, changed the padding a little, and border radius a little bit, changed the color. That's what made it look like this. Okay. Now again, I don't want you to get too wrapped up in the way that this necessarily looks. You might not like the design. My point here is to understand how this is responsive by default, and then how you can build your sites in such a way using those modifier classes where it becomes really easy once you've once you've kind of built the CSS once, to use it to then build your websites and be able to build it completely different websites using really the same CSS, because of just by changing the modifiers that you add to certain elements. And again, the importance of that is things like Bootstrap and Foundation stuff have a bunch of those modifiers inside of them. So when you understand those frameworks and how they work and what's available to you in terms of the modifiers that you can use, then it can be really powerful, the different things that you can do in terms of building your website. And that's ultimately, when it comes to responsive web design and really just good web design going forward, that's what we're after. All right. Probably the one last thing to look at here is this UL tag. You'll notice this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with responsiveness, but I imagine that it's something that you may want to do at some point. So if I've replaced the standard icons with with this check mark, and I have them so the wrapping is all correct and so forth. This is basically how to do that. So we do the reset on the UL tag, like you're probably familiar with, margin 0, padding 0, list style type none. That gets rid of the default bullets that the browser creates. And then we add some padding to our list item tag. The one that we're really after that's important here is the padding left, which is 1.5 ems. That matches down here what we're doing here. This essentially handles the wrapping so that you can get enough space for your icon to show up, but when your text goes to a new line, it doesn't kick over underneath the icon. It still has the correct padding so that it lines up correctly and looks like a bullet. All right, so that's this padding left on your LI element, and then LI before the margin left is a negative 1.5 ems and the width is 1.5 ems. Okay, that's what makes that happen. From there, it's just I'm using Font Awesome. You could use whatever icon font you like. The content is their Unicode for that particular font that I wanted. Display inline block, and then whatever color you want it to be. Okay, so that's essentially what makes this list item stuff happen over here. All right, so that is the practical exercise of building a fluid grid website. Again, understand when you're talking about a grid, it's natural to think of, I'm a table, I'm just building a table, but grid actually really means you're going to have different columns essentially. Sometimes you'll have full width column like here. Sometimes you'll have 4 across. Sometimes you'll have 2 across with one wider than the other. the grid allows you, those spans is what allows you to build those and make it so that when you resize, it's all naturally responsive. You don't have to write a bunch of responsive code. Again, if you look down here in our responsive section, there's very little inside of our media queries. All we're really editing is our container element and our font sizes. That's all we're really doing. We're modifying our span here for anything under 768 pixels. That's what gives us the top to bottom view. But outside of that, there's very little that you're having to write inside of your responsive section. This is kind of what it should probably look like for your site. Obviously, there may be a few things where you have to add more responsive elements and so forth. But again, there's very, very, very little down here. It's probably a good idea if you are going to build a framework like this from scratch, to take your responsive code and take all of your code for your framework and put those in kind of a separate file, and then all of your more specific, site-specific stuff, the modifiers that you want for a particular framework or whatever, to put those in a file by themselves and put that all in one place, so you understand the difference between your framework. You can even go so far as to put all of your framework in one CSS file, all of your general modifiers like uppercase, background blue, align center, put those in another file, and then put all your your really specific stuff like footer P and your features list and so forth. Put those all in a third file and include the framework, the modifiers, and then your specific stuff like that. That way, it's just a way of organizing it for you. Plus, when you use a framework like Bootstrap, they're going to give you a CSS file that's basically your framework, and you're not going to want to edit that CSS file. You're going to create a new CSS file, and you're going to add in kind of your modifiers and your site specific code in that file. Or, like I said, you could separate those two things into two files as well. So that's how you're going to kind of do it anyway when you're working with a framework. All right, so that is the fluid grid, how to build a fluid grid, how to use modifiers, how to make it responsive by default, and so forth. So hopefully you found that helpful, and I'll talk to you later.